At just shy of 20 years old, one night, I left my apartment carrying with me a sawed-off shotgun, in which I used to commit a series of horrendous crimes, from robberies to carjackings. And looking back, I can see clearly how serious a threat I was to society, and I believe the gesture served well the victims, community, and in myself in ensuring that I was off the streets. For it being possible for me to approximate the damages I've caused my community, nor will I ever know the totality of the pain I caused victims. I held innocent people at gunpoint and feared for their lives. And I not only robbed them of their honest wages, but also for their peace, joy, and their security, replacing those with feelings of fear, dread, and anxiety. How could I ever repay that? Could I ever repay that? I don't know. But with an earnest heart and my endeavor to reconcile and repair the damages that I've caused, I submit that the most meaningful step I've taken towards doing so was by taking accountability for my actions. But that wasn't easy. See, I recall sitting in court the day of my sentence, totally oblivious to everything taking place. There was a disconnect. Because in my 32 years, a judge or a public official had never spoken a word to me, nor had I to a judge or a prosecutor, outside of the word guilty. Guilty. See, guilty was really a plea for mercy in a deeper expression of how young, black, poor, uneducated, and confused. And it also didn't occur to me that it was by my own admission of guilt I had agreed to enter a plea and accept a prison sentence for more time than I had actually lived at that point. But instead of feeling accountability and a remorse for my actions, I sat emotionless before the judge as he read aloud my charges. I didn't think or feel a thing. I couldn't think or feel a thing, as if I was not the person responsible for those crimes, or as if I was never present at all. But why? Why couldn't I feel? See, I believe that my lack of accountability and remorse wasn't because I was inherently evil or some cold-hearted criminal. Nah. My lack of accountability stemmed from my inability to love and be vulnerable with myself so that I may love and empathize with others. And in that light, I now understood the correlation that without empathy, there could be no accountability. But it had been that way for as long as I could remember. Growing up in a marginalized community that never showed empathy, that never cultivated pro-social values, that prioritized public education and safety, there was a gap. Because instead, we were taught to fear, be distrustful, and even hostile towards public officials, especially when the only image we saw of the police was of them arresting and locking someone up we looked up to as a father or a brother. And also being abandoned by both biological parents as an infant, separated from my siblings. I grew up in a household alone, isolated, lacking in affection, so I honestly didn't know how to feel a connection to anyone, certainly not the type of interconnectedness one is supposed to feel with his community, yet alone the victims of my crimes. I was also bullied and beaten often as an adolescent. And I can still remember those days trying to avoid conflict in and out of school. It's funny now, but it wasn't funny then, how I used to have to get off the bus at earlier stops or cut through people's houses and alleyways and even hop fences. But nah, see, these kids in my eyes, they weren't normal kids. They were like advanced criminals to me, or like little baby trained assassins who would tactically track me down and whoop me in some of the most unlikely and unsuspecting places, right? So what did I do? I began carrying a knife for self-defense. And one day, during my second year of middle school, I pulled that knife. And consequently, I was taken before the principal's office, and being a young, introverted, inarticulate boy that I was unable to express my anxieties and my fears. I was unable to give a valid explanation at all. Instead, I sat silent, which school officials misinterpreted as an act of defiance and a blatant disregard for authority and the safety of my peers. And this resulted to my immediate expulsion, a criminal charge, and a referral to juvenile justice custody. Unbeknownst to me, I had just entered the school to prison pipeline and was spit right through. Another time I recall struggling with accountability is when I was 15. One night I was so hungry, I decided to order a pizza to an unknown residence with no intentions to pay. Why? Because I had no money to pay. Not knowing that this would cost me dearly, because after I was caught, I was charged as an adult for grand larceny. And by the time I turned 18, with no education, no employable job skills, and a felony conviction, it was like having a death sentence, prematurely killing my dreams of becoming a Marine, of going to college, or a chance at a normal life at all. So I began to spiral out of control. And by 19, I entered prison. But ironically, prison, figuratively speaking, prison had set me free. How? Because upon entering, the Virginia DOC were the first ones to give me an actual opportunity and the tools that I needed. But ultimately, I had to put forth the effort and take accountability for my own rehabilitation and the changes that I needed to make. So I started with my education. I earned my GED, which is the highest level of education completed in my household. And after developing work ethic by working prison jobs and getting the job skills that I needed, I can now say that I can return to society and create my own financial freedom and my own security. But that wasn't enough. See, during the course of my incarceration, I've also tried to utilize my time seeking to understand the public's perspective. I had to know why I deserved the punishment I had received. I needed to understand the law and exactly what does justice mean. So I began frequenting the law library. I read law books, case law, wrote briefs. I even watched law shows because I felt as if learning this was the only way that I can truly understand public safety, take accountability, and develop a genuine remorse for my actions. And you know what? It worked. And this was groundbreaking to me and a real turnkey moment, considering that the law is rarely ever taught in black communities. Justice is rarely ever experienced. And for the first time in my life, I learned what my rights were and how vital those rights were to the safety of my community as well as my own social well-being, right? And once I exhausted all prison legal resources, I took it a step farther by enrolling into a paralegal course where I earned my legal assistant certification. Thank you. And to say the least, I was so proud, very, very proud, because I felt as if I had transformed from a justice offender to a justice defender. And with that education and academic, I began writing a youth gang intervention program called Embody that comprehensively integrates aspects of the law and public safety in its module in a way that the youth can relate to in hopes to induce positive change. And you know what? I can honestly say that I am grateful for the punishment that I received and all that justice has done to aid my rehabilitation and correction. I learned empathy by being able to accept accountability, which has contributed to my personal growth in ways that I possibly couldn't have imagined. And I now feel acutely connected with my community, and I have a healthy regard and opinion for public authority, right? I'm politically conscious and informed without bias or prejudice. In fact, I've begun my days for years with the local news in the morning, The View at noon, News Nation in the evening, and the Mike Huckabee Show at night. Who would have imagined the Mike Huckabee Show, right? But this experience has also taught me to value the rights of others as I would have valued my own had I known what they were and what they truly meant to me before I lost them. And with a keen sense of justice, I now understand my relation to my community, as well as my moral obligation, why it's important that I do all I can to possibly rectify and restore those relations. See, I think that today, that the public is very capable of understanding the hardships of disadvantaged people in communities. But the principle lies within the law. My community needed me to acknowledge the fact that I broke the law so that we can then begin to heal, forgive, and move forward. See, when we hold ourselves accountable, we then have the rights to hold others accountable. And in that respect, I believe I've done everything in my power to take accountability as well as make my transformation a permanent reality in preparation for my return back to society as a law-abiding, tax-paying, and productive citizen. And I look forward to one day walking across that bridge, bridging the gap from corrections to community in hopes that you will forgive and give me a second chance. Shalom. Thank you.